Hello, it's Scott Cook here again with another Let's Play of Kerbal Space Program. This is episode 2 where I'm going to be basically laying the groundwork for my long-term space program, getting things ready to go and to start exploring the galaxy. So, straight to Kerbal Space Center here. This time I'm going to be launching some probes. First things first, I need to explore the galaxy and figure it out. Now this vehicle actually designed to launch 4 probes at once, and we're going to send one to the Mun, one to Minmus, and then we're going to send 2 to break Kerbin orbit and try to get out to Duna and Eve. So an interesting thing happened with this one here is you can see my nav ball was a little screwed up. The reason for that was because I had originally designed this with the first of the 4 probes, just building it one by one. Then I built the cradle and quadrupled it. And as a result, the actual main probe body that was controlling it was off center on one of those probes. So I just had to switch to control from the probe body that was underneath the cradle, and then it got my nav bulb centered back to where it should have been. Now this was a little bit of an asymmetrical vehicle, just little things stuck on the side and things that caused it to veer off course just a little bit, so there's a little bit of me controlling it, even though SAS is still doing a fairly good job. I get her up, and eventually we are out in orbit. So this episode is going to be a little bit faster because I've got a lot I want to get done with this one here. So we're going to get these 4 probes out into orbit, and then I've got to take each one of those to its destination. I've got 2 vehicles I want to launch, and I got to get one of them to dock with the space station, and one of them is going to be going out to the Mun. These missions will provide the groundwork for me to get started with my kethane mining operation. Start delivering kethane from the Mun because it's much cheaper and easier to get it out of there with the low gravity. Back to Kerbin rather than launching cans that tend to explode or shimmy themselves to pieces, which is just ugly. Yeah, I'm still bitter about the gas can. Man, that thing sucked. You'll also notice throughout this video I'm going to be doing a lot of transitions where I've cut a lot of time out. When you're moving probes around with xenon engines, they tend to be really slow with long burn times. You get some great delta V out of them. I think these probes each can get about 10,000 delta V out of each one, but it's a slow process. Each of my burns took anywhere from 24 to 30 minutes just to get it to where it was going, and I usually had to include an orbit around a planet at least once before I got it to where I needed to go. So as we get closer to circularization here, I'm just going to get them into a stable orbit. We'll disconnect each probe individually then and get them to where they're going. First one will be to the Mun, then I'm going to do Minmus. I'm going to do a couple that's going to break Kerbin orbit, and from there I will try to get them to Duna and Eve. Now, since I was circularizing the planet anyway, I decided I may as well scan it for kethane. Yes, you can find kethane on Kerbin. Is it practical to get? Probably not. But I figured, what the hey, I'm up here anyway. So now we begin circularization burn. This will only take a few seconds. That engine is off of the Deep Space Mission Pack. Again, I really like it for its low profile and efficiency and high thrust to weight ratio. It's not perfect. It might even be considered a bit OP or overpowered, but God, I love it. I use it for a lot of things just because that shape and size is so practical for a lot of my applications. So since my last game, I've actually installed another mod. I've got the Kerbal alarm clock now. For those of you that may have never seen it before, it allows you to keep track of when things like sphere of influence changes happen, when you set up maneuver nodes. It basically just stops the game if it's in time warp, so that you have an opportunity not to go flying past those. I'll get into a little bit more of it later. As also, I've got another mod pack I've been using for these probes. It's the Ion Hybrid Electric Pack. Those grayish tanks that look not stock, are just basically xenon tanks. And the reason I decided to get this mod pack was for the radial ion engines. They come in handy. It allowed me to keep the front and my back of my probes available for other gear, like my docking port and my kethane scanner. Now, 4 of those radial ports equal 1 rear ion engine, so they're not OP in any way. So now I'm just going to set up a maneuver node for my Mun encounter, but this becomes redundant later because I decided that instead of sending the probe ahead, I was actually going to capture it with another vehicle. I came up with the idea of capturing it with my kethane miner. The reason I put the docking port on the back of all my probes is it allows me to capture them and reuse them if I want to. So you'll see that a little bit later here, but I'd rename this one the Mun just so that I can keep them separate. And we're moving forward. Now we're on to the next one. This next probe is going to go to Minmus. Just decoupler there. Go forward. Get it some juice. Get the engines active. It's right around here where I'm going to start cutting away some footage just because you guys don't need to see me doing these incredibly long burns, and they're just kind of painful, to be honest with you. I was glad I was able to do something else while I was playing Kerbin here. Anyway, just finalizing my node for Minmus, playing around with it here, and making sure I come in at the right angle so that I'm not going to get too off center. Again, just playing around with it, trying to get a nice, consistent one. So, see me just playing with the nodes, just pulling it, putting it, and getting some interesting trajectories out of it. But I finally settled on that one, I believe. Or maybe not. I'll start playing with it again, just to see what I can get out of it. Now, if you're paying attention, you can see there's two nodes there, actually. That is because Minmus is a little more interesting to get to than the Mun. It's got a higher inclination on Kerbin. It's not even with the equator. So therefore you have to do an inclination burn. And then you have to do your actual transition burn. Or you can kind of combine them if you're savvy. I wasn't too worried about it because, again, these things have a huge amount of delta V. And it just worked out a little nicer for me to do one and then the other real quickly. So now we're just going to get to the point where I do that first burn. And this is where it starts to get real painful. So we're just going to align here and start a burn now. You get those pretty blue ion engines going. Alright, so there they go. Just orientate my solar panels here in a sec so they're facing the sun. Make sure I don't run out of power. And that's pretty much all there is to it. That right there is the Kerbal alarm clock going off for this particular probe. I was already on it because I knew it was coming up. And yeah, this is basically launching probes. It's slow, it's painful, and it sucks. You can't time accelerate. You can't really do much other than just watch it. So this is the kind of thing where you'd want to be doing something else while you're playing the game. I figured I'd cut away quickly just to show you how the Keythane mod works now. It used to be just a map sat, but now they've actually put a grid system over the planet. The filled in hexagons are those places that have been scanned. And it's actually nice because it works with time acceleration too. I really like the new way they did it. So the next vehicle we're going to launch is my Keythane miner. Now I'm really proud of this vehicle. It took me a fair amount of time to get it working just right. It's got the nuclear reactor from the Deep Space mission pack again, so that I can basically mine non-stop in the day and the night. I don't have to worry about fragile solar panels. It's a heavy bugger of a vehicle to launch. It takes a little bit of effort, so I'm going to be using mostly KW rocketry parts to get this sucker into orbit. As you can see, they're using the big thrusts and the liquid canisters in an asparagus staging setup. Again, the center booster's not burning right now, which means that whole center tank hasn't even been used yet. It's really good for getting it up past the first bit of gravity now. We're going to just launch here, and Billy Bob and I think it's Cunford are just having a grand old time. They're like smiling away. It's great. And then they're like, oh my god, what was that? And they're like looking around and like, oh, what did we lose? What did we lose? What did we lose? And they're like, so we're still going up. Everything's okay. Everything's okay. Actually, yeah, the gas canister bounced off of the booster and just exploded. I just love the way those Kerbins reacted to it. It was perfect. Alright, so next one's and boom again. They're like, oh god, this sucks. Who built this thing? This sucks. Anyway. It does a little bit of a shimmy and shake, but I get her back down to the correct angle to start leaving the gravity well and getting her set up. Just doing all right. So as we get a little closer to about 20,000 meters off the ground here, I'm going to fire my nuclear engines. I do this again simply to provide a little bit more additional boost to get her into the upper atmosphere. Now, they're not that efficient at low atmo, so you don't want to do this unless you have to. However, I've got enough gas, and this provides enough. Now, I'm also irradiating the entire atmosphere in the area, so this isn't very good. But nevertheless, again, with KW rocketry, because you're dealing with some huge thrusts, and throttling up and throttling down can create some rather difficult shock waves, you got to be careful. So that's part of the reason these nuclear engines are used this low in atmo, is just to stabilize it as the main booster can there run out of gas. And then we lose string and we just let go, and oh man, not again. So Billy Bob's just like, oh man, I gotta get this thing straight. He's having no luck with this launch. I mean, if anything goes any worse, it could be bad. But he gets her back under control as a credit to him as a Kerbal Knot. start to do a little bit of a circularization burn just to make sure. Again, because I'm using nuclear engines to circularize, you're generally going to have a longer burn to deal with them. Now, this isn't the case to the tug from my previous video. This one's at least got 8 nuclear engines, so it's generating a fair amount more force, and it's actually a lot easier to circularize. So when I was designing this craft, I actually came up with the idea of flaring out the engines a little bit. As you notice, it kind of shoots in a bit of a cone. It actually worked out really well as a design decision because that allowed me to stuff a whole bunch of other components underneath it that might not have normally fit. It worked out incredibly well, and I really like the way those engines flare out as a profile. Works out pretty good. The other design decision is I've actually got 8 nuclear engines on this craft. Now that's way more than I would need for a craft this size, even at full load. The only reason I did it that way was A, I needed to keep it relatively symmetrical, and B, this craft is designed to break gravity. Now it's not designed to break gravity on high grav worlds, like it would never take off of Eve. It probably would have a hell of a time taking off of Duna. But any of the other smaller bodies, it isn't too bad. It's not too bad. I mean, it's got a fairly solid lift thrust to weight ratio. The other thing you got to keep in mind is kethane. It can store 8,000 units of kethane. Now that is very dense material. Kethane is much heavier, or adds a lot of mass to the vehicle when you've loaded it up. Keeping in mind that Kerbal Engineer mod, for example, if you look at it when you're building your vehicles, doesn't consider, or takes into consideration the kethane tanks as their weight when they're emptied. It doesn't actually consider them full. So anyways, what I'm doing right now is catching my probe. This is the first probe that I launched, and I was decided, you know, it'd be much easier to just bring this vehicle with me when I brought the probe as well. That way I can just attach them and be a lot faster than burning, and, you know, really doesn't save me that much time or effort. So I'm just letting MechJeb do the last little bits of the approach because it does that really well. And then I'll do the docking. Again, you can see here I'm going to capture it with the docking port on the front of my ship here. And then I'm going to just haul the probe all the way out to the moon as well. So as we get going here, I just switch quickly to the probe, make sure its docking port is facing my kethane rig. I want to make sure do the maneuvers with this one because it turns a little easier. It's a little nicer to control. There's not so much weight that bobs around as much. When you're capturing small stuff like this that has almost no weight, you got to be a little careful with it. The magnets on the docking ports can actually have quite a bit of attraction with regards to the smaller mass of the probe. Tend to suck it in and just bang and bounce off. I've had a situation once where I was trying to dock with something really small and it was just a miserable experience because I'd get close. If it was just a hair off, it would bounce off of my docking port, and then I'd have to start pretty much all over again. It was just painful. Again, this one actually went relatively smoothly. I didn't have too many problems. I got her lined up. Again, thanks to that docking port alignment mod from Navyfish. Wonderful thing. Before that, I was using the docking camera that came with the laser mod. I've got that included on this one too. But it's not quite as user-friendly as this was, so I really enjoy this mod for it really sped up all of my docking procedures a fair amount. So well, this takes a few minutes till we just kind of watch me come in for a docking alignment here. I'm just going to tell you a little bit of something that's going on in my personal life. I'm going to be traveling to Austin, Texas in October, the 10th specifically. I was planning to go visit some friends down there that had a baby recently. Also, if some of you guys are familiar with the Star Citizen project from Chris Roberts and CIG Games, there's a Citizen Con down there. Now, to be invited, you got to be a backer of, I think, $5,000, which unfortunately I'm not. However, I've probably spent more on pledges than I have on any other game I've played to date. Please don't tell my girlfriend. But the cool thing about that community is that on the forums, one of the guys there was starting to post, well, we should all have a dinner and get together. So it sounds like I'm going to be at least able while I'm down there to meet a bunch of the fans and kind of get to know some of them. And if you're interested in helping a crowd-funded space sim that, in my opinion, is really sticking it to big developers and just saying, you know, this is a better way of doing things, go away, then go check out the Roberts Space Industries. I'll put a link in my description. So now we're just coming in for the final approach here for the probe. Nice and straight, slow and careful, you know. You don't want to rush these things because bad things can happen and stuff can ensue. And I probably should have pulled those solar panels in, but I was confident with my skills. And Doc, we got her. All's good. So we'll just pull those solar panels in because I no longer need them. And then we plot our trajectory out to the moon. So while I'm plotting this maneuver node here, I'm just, again, pulling on it and pushing on it, just trying to find a nice, you know, the way to get out there with the least amount of delta V. I have plenty of fuel to spare in this ship, but nevertheless, it never hurts to be efficient in this game. You never, you know, it's always nice not to end up at your destination without enough gas to land. That really sucks. I've had a few heartbreaking crashes where at the last, you know, 10 meters or 15 meters off the ground I have no gas and it speeds up just enough to blow my ship up, and it's just like, oh, all that effort to get there, and it's just like, ah! So I just sped ahead a little bit here just to finish the burn out to the moon. Now the rig's on a intercept course and it's got a encounter, so I'm just setting the alarm, and then I get to go back to moving probes around. Hey, my space dock. So here's another probe. I believe this is the Minmus one that's going out to Minmus. I'm just having to do the painful long burns. I think you can see in here it's got like a 24-minute burn. And that's a little deceptive because it's not going to, it's such low thrust that it doesn't, there's a bit of a rounding error or something in there that's causing it to count down a little slower than it should. Anyway, I'm just kind of trying to do my burn as early as possible so I can do it in one revolution, and I'm just like, yeah, that's not gonna happen. As you can see here, I'm hammering it, and so we're just gonna be, yeah, this is just slow. I really got nothing for you. However, I did speed ahead here right away, and again, just to give you an idea, that probably was about 15 minutes, and I mean, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna run out of sun again, so I'm gonna have to do another revolution before I get out to Minmus at least. Again, you're fighting time when you got no sun and all you got is solar panels, but that's okay. I debated, you know, building these probes with more xenon engines to get them going a little bit faster, but then you're contending with more weight, and then you need more electricity to keep them going, so you just kind of have to bite the bullet and accept it. I do wish there was a way to time accelerate when you were doing these long burns, but it probably would create some kind of physics crash. Anyway, so the sun ducks behind the horizon of Kerbin, and so now we're just waiting for the battery to die, and then I would shut down my xenon engines and time accelerate around again and come around for one more pass. I didn't make you people sit through that because that's just boring, but I finally, on my second pass, get enough delta V into this thing that I can get my encounter with Minmus. I was just tweaking the orbit a little bit and I missed it and I had to tweak it again just to get my encounter back. But for the most part, this probe's on its way out and I don't have to worry about it too much anymore. I can just give it, set up a node in my Kerbal alarm clock, and we're done. Kerbal alarm clock's a great mod. Not only can you time your sphere of influence changes, it also can be used to watch for the phase angles of the planets so that when they're aligned and you can actually make an encounter, you can just set an alarm to, again, alert you when it's time to go. Now, in my case, the closest one was Moho with just over a day worth of, before the phase angles, but I'm in no position to take advantage of that, so I was setting up the other two. Now, this would be probe number 3, which I haven't officially named yet. I think I was just going to call them Eve and Duna, even though I was just basically getting them out of Kerbin's sphere of influence, and then from there I was going to tweak them. Now, I wasn't waiting for the phase angles like I was talking about. I think this is the other one, the other probe actually, but I'm just going to use the moon here to do a bit of a gravity maneuver to get it to help it. It actually reduces the delta V just a hair. It probably is just fun. I enjoy doing those gravity maneuvers. I don't lie. It's kind of cool to watch the probe just kind of get pulled into the moon and then out again. So now Rig has entered the moon's sphere of influence. I just got to set up a node on the periaps now. Basically doing the retrograde burn, just to make sure we can get ourselves a stable orbit around the moon, and then we can start looking for Kethane and drop off the probe. Alright, so I'm just going to finish this node up here. Now, once the rig gets on the planet and is able to start mining Kethane, it's actually going to stay there for a little while. and start ferrying up fuel to some of my ships that are going to be following it to the moon. A few of them are going to need a little bit of refueling before I can actually land them. Anyway, back at Kerbal Space Center here, I've got my next vehicle, the Big Rig. I'm using the cab from TT Modular Wheels because this vehicle is designed to haul stuff back and forth. I felt it was appropriate and I liked it a lot. Again, this vehicle's a bit heavier to launch, mostly because of the main body of the actual rig is just a large fuel can. So I'm using the boosters again from KW Rocketry, using the asparagus setup. It's pretty standard. I use this for most of my launches unless there's a really good reason not to. And once this one gets into orbit, I'm going to be sending it to meet up with my space station. Once the rig is attached to the space station, it's going to stay there for a bit. It's going to haul out the next big piece of the kethane, or the long-term space operation, to extract kethane from the moon. The rig ship that I've got there right now is only a temporary solution. It's a little more mobile. It can find some of the safer landing spots, do some surveying, provide short-range refueling operations within the orbit of whatever body. So it's going to be kind of a predecessor ship, or the first manned ship on most of my excursions. It'll probably go to Duna, it'll probably go to Eve, it'll probably go to Jewel at some point, and it's basically it's the explorer ship. So once this thing is finished delivering its first major payload to the moon, it's going to return and then probably carry out the first piece to the space station that will be going around the moon. The space station for the moon is probably going to be the same design as the one I've got for Kerbin, just because I like the simplicity of it. It should provide everything I need, and then some. So the only thing is, I'm just going to have to make 2 trips for 2 major pieces in the fuel and logistics and whatnot. So this one either might carry the first one or the second one. We're going to have to basically play that one by ear as we go. But we'll figure it out, have no doubt. This vehicle's design actually turned out quite well. It's incredibly simple, but you notice I've also got the retro thrusters on this one. Similar concept to the Tug, because I had mentioned that when I was doing the first one. If this thing's carrying huge payloads, having braking engines rather than having to flip the vehicle back and forth, especially when you're just using a docking port to pull and push with, can really save you some serious headaches, because when you start flipping big pieces around on docking ports, they start to wiggle and wobble, and they can break, and they can do all kinds of scary things. And so if you basically just pull and push, they don't seem to have as many issues that I've noticed so far. We'll get more into that later, because I have to use some of these docking ports to drop off payloads, and I'm going to have some sky cranes for the moon that are going to drop vehicles and base pieces and whatnot I need down there at some point as well. And you're going to get to see how I came about solving some of these problems of breakaways and things of that nature. So now we're just going to finish our circularization burn, and I'm going to use MechJeb again just to do a encounter, to do a rendezvous with my space station, simply because it's faster, a little bit easier, and whatnot. Now, I did come into one problem as I started to do a rendezvous with this vehicle, but then my alarm went off for my rig at the moon, and I had to do my retro burn to stabilize its orbit. So this thing ended up doing a couple revolutions around the planet. Right now, just deploying the solar panels. I really like that shape. Now, retrograde. Burning. Jeez, my ass is burning. Yo hoy! Oh, okay, I promise I'll never do that again. But one thing I didn't mention about the design of this vehicle is actually the crew cab, or it's actually using your landing can. That's actually right at the bottom of the vehicle. It's right nestled in the center of those nice warm nuclear engines. So when I start thinking about burning, I'm sure the crew can definitely relate. If not, give me the finger and call me a giant butthole. Okay, so we've got our stabilized orbit, sitting nicely at about 25 kilometers off the surface of the moon at the periaps. So I just got to set up one more node here and set the alarm clock, and we will be at the moon. It's awesome. Sweet. Alright. Back to the truck. So, now we're just basically doing our setup here, and I think it's Mumford is having a grand old time. The other 2 guys are like, this job sucks. Anyway, I decided to take a moment to just look in the cab and enjoy it. I mean, It's just so silly and awesome in so many ways. It's just having a nice view of that nebula and nice steering wheel. I'm just awesome. Anyways, this is our orbital station, and we come flying past it. I'm like, brakes, 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 brakes! Anyway, I was lucky we didn't hit it. I was like, mech jab, that could have been bad. Anyway, it eventually comes to a stop, and then we have to do another corrective burn to catch up to it. It's like, I'm going to have to keep an eye on that, make sure I'm hitting that quick save, just in case it actually rips a piece off of that station. Man, that could have been ugly. So now that we went flying past it, we're just going to quickly get back into close orbit. MechJab does some great things here, and it's a wonderful app for taking some of the more time-consuming maneuvers out of the equation. Someone from my forum actually pointed out that I might be using an outdated version, and that's why it's doing some strange things here. I sped ahead just a hair because all you're watching is a slow approach to it. But we get to within 100 meters, and I take over. I'm going to pick that docking port right there because it's sort of facing me. Sort of not. Anyway, so again with the docking alignment port, the vehicle's kind of heavy right now, so it tends to want to oversteer. It takes a little bit of a silk touch that I'm still acquiring. Part of the issue I have with some of these maneuvers is I'm using a wireless keyboard, and occasionally when I push a button it doesn't react as quickly as I'd like. I'm going to have to probably upgrade that at some point to get a little more degree of control. So I'm just going to start coming into the docking port here. I've pretty much got this. I've done this many times before. This with the docking alignment, it's relatively painless now. It used to be a lot more difficult when you'd have to line things up with the orbits and then just use the indicators on the nav ball. Now, some people still do that, and kudos to you. I have nothing against those guys that like doing things in hardcore mode. However, I'm more interested in this particular game of doing a logistical game than I am doing difficult maneuvers right now. I kind of got into the difficult maneuver thing when I first started Kerbal Space Program. I didn't really do a lot of actual building or anything like that. I just launched rockets and went crazy. It was a lot of fun though. This is more my attempt to really make something, just to make something really interesting in this game. I really enjoy these builder games. I played a lot of Minecraft, especially when the Tech It pack and the Feed the Beast packs were out, and they had all those mods, and they were just so technical. It was wonderfully fun. Shortly thereafter, KSP came out, and I found out about it, and it was just like, I'm sorry, Minecraft, how do you compete with building rockets? I'm sorry. Rockets trump all. And you can quote me on that. So I'm coming in carefully, slowly, and I'm like, I got this. I'm a little concerned at this point. My one wing there is going to clip the tug, so I do a little bit of a rotation to make sure I miss it. I might move the tug to the back end of the space station just because I think right there it creates a bit of a hit. And I'm like bang, I hit the thing. I'm like, all right, we can dock now. Dock. What the? Not docking. I back up. I take another look at it. I'm like, what happened? I didn't dock. So I'm like, okay, well, we'll get another approach here. Just kind of back off a little bit here and get my swinging a little under control. The problem is now the station's rotating too. So I'm going to have to switch to that quickly and just make sure that I take the rotation out of it. So, lining up again. I got this. Again, I'm kind of concerned I'm going to clip the tug. I noticed that the solar panels are still out on it and I don't need them there. I probably should have closed those two. Little details that you don't think of at the last minute, right? And I'm just like, station. Just hold still for a sec. So I switch to it quickly. Make sure the SAS is on so that it stops rotating, and that more or less fixes it. Get lined up for one more pass. I'm like, I gotta do this time. I don't crash too often. Get in there. Get everything lined up. Just tweak it a little bit. Get all my nose facing the correct way. And it looks like I've got it this time. No problem. No problem whatsoever. I got this. All lined up and ready to go. So we're coming in one more time. Just taking her easy. Making sure I have everything right, because I don't want to do this again. It's embarrassing when you miss a docking port. It's just like, Mumford's like, ah, he's having a grand old time. The other two guys are like, you're gonna wreck it. And it's like, no, I got this. So we're moving in, and getting there. Close, close. I can't see anything wrong with this. It's just perfect lineup. And bang. I'm like, oh no, I derped. I forgot to control it from the docking port. So it was actually coming in with the cab. I probably should have drove it from the cab because that might have been a lot more interesting to watch. But as soon as I figured out what I did wrong. Success! We have docking. And with that, I'm going to call it an episode. Next episode I'll try to have out fairly soon for you. And we're going to actually start hauling some big loads. So you guys stay in the verse, stay safe, and have a great time. Goodbye.